Welcome to WorksheetCloud Grade 9 English. I hope that you're having a wonderful start to your day, or maybe if your day is already almost complete, that you've had a good one. Today we're going to be doing a poetry lesson, and I think it's definitely something we can all relate to in a way, but it will also give us a deeper understanding of where our parents are often coming from. I know we think our parents are aliens, we think they're crazy, sometimes we even think they're monsters for trying to enforce rules, but there are a few things we need to understand from their perspective as well. And I group myself with you guys in this grade 9s because I know that I was not an easy teenager. And looking back now, even though I don't have my own children yet, I already can understand and can just appreciate more of what my parents actually did for me. Also, before we go on, parents can mean anything. Some of you might live with granny and grandpa. Some of you might live with guardians, aunt and uncle, brother or sister even who looks after you in the house. So when I say parents, I'm talking about anyone in your life that fulfills that role of looking after you. So without further ado, grade 9 English worksheet clouders, let's get started with today's lesson. So I'm starting with a bit of a insight, and this is just a quote that I think will really help in those moments where you just feel your parents are so unfair. And that's to appreciate your parents. You never actually know the sacrifices they go through for you. Only much later, and that's the whole thing about hindsight is 2020, only much later do you start to grasp what it actually meant and what they actually give up to sacrifice for your happiness. So it is very much Parental Appreciation Day today, and the poem that we do is going to be celebrating your parents. Right, so the poem is from a South African poet. It is called You Cannot Know the Fears I Have. And no, I haven't made any punctuation errors there by making you and I, you being the start of the title and I obviously being the personal pronoun. It is to be in small letters, no caps. We'll get to what that meaning is a little bit later. Shabir Bunabai is our poet, and he wrote this poem from a personal perspective. So it's very much his voice coming through. And just to make sure you understand the setting, he wrote it during apartheid. So there's very much some fear coming from his side as well about the times. All right, so it's just important for you to understand the setting, South Africa, apartheid. It just gives you a little bit more insight into what he is so worried about. Okay, so I think let's get going with the actual reading of this poem. First, the theme. Shabir wrote this poem to his future child. So he doesn't have a child yet while he's writing, but he's actually contemplating. So he has this whole hypothetical argument with himself as to whether or not he should have a child. He said that his child won't receive an education. She won't receive all the things that, sort of make your childhood so free and innocent. And he's worried she'll be oppressed by apartheid. In the end, Shabir makes the decision, will have this child, for maybe this child will change the world. Okay, so a thought there to expect from your child, but he knows that by having this child, instead of worrying about the circumstances, maybe she can help to change the circumstances. Okay, so I'm going to read the poem now for you. You cannot know the fears I have as I think about you. I fear that I shall live only at your laughter, lie awake long nights while you sleep, so loneliness does not trouble you, nor hunger, nor thirst. Overwhelm your waking world with wonder, with the music of other worlds. Your earlier home, read to you poems written when the night before, while you smile bewildered. Or just when my very breathing depends on you, Even as your tiny fingers close around mine, some insensitive thing crushes your butterfly spirit. Shadows of a sun-darkened land flow over you, and the eclipse closes your eyes. I cannot live with the thought of having you, loving you any other way. A day without such care has no meaning. We shall find for you a name. Your name shall bring light. Right, so very, very deep poem, very much about just the fear he has about not being able to give this child all the comforts and security that she needs. He then also worries that his entire existence is going to be wrapped up in this child, and he can't always protect her. But he comes to the realization that she might just be the person needed to make change. And why is he then holding back? All right, so it's a beautiful poem, very vulnerable. And I think that really is something that you have to understand, is that your parents, they can't always protect you. And that scares them so much. You are almost like their heart living in a body. And imagine having so much love for someone and just knowing that you can't always be there for them. And I think that's very sad, but it also shows that your parents are incredibly selfless. They've given up so much, they've taken on so much, so that you can feel as secure as possible. All right, let's look a little bit more in depth at the lines analysis of this poem. Right, so the poem was written, obviously, like I said, at a time when Shabir Burnabai was contemplating having a child. He did have a child in 1992. Her name is Taskia. Right, so they did have a child after writing this poem. Taskia being her name, beautiful name, and I know he ends there by saying her name is going to have importance. Right, so he did in the end have a little girl, and just to give you that, as we said, it was written in the early 1980s, just before, and the country was in political turmoil. So it is a bit scary when you think, ooh, I have fears, and I can't even actually comprehend how fearful I'm going to be trying to protect my child. Right, to fully understand the poem, it's often necessary to insert I fear that I shall, I fear that, or I fear, because sometimes the line references then just seem a bit muddled. So let's have a look at what that means. All right, so I fear that I shall lie awake long nights. I fear that loneliness and hunger and thirst will trouble you. I fear that I shall overwhelm you. I fear that I shall have to read poems to you that confuse you. I fear that my breathing depends on you. I fear that shadows of a sun-darkened land will flow over you. I fear that I cannot live without you, right? And I fear that my life will have no meaning without you. So if you put the I fear from the title into your actual understanding, it helps to know what he's saying. And I also think that repetition the whole time of I fear, it just shows how vulnerable this man is being and how worried he is. This is even before he has a child. So imagine how much worry your parents have when they do have a child. It really just puts this burden in perspective. You're not a burden. But your parents will always carry that on their shoulders of worrying. So again, make it easier for them. Don't lie to them. Be honest. Be transparent. It's horrible having to know that your parents fear for you all the time. So try and be as clear in your communication with them as possible, even when you want to be moody. Right, so he's talking here to an unborn child. All right, so he's talking future tense. You can't know the fears I have as I think about you. I'm now thinking ahead. Right, he says here, he shall live only at her laughter and lie awake long nights while she sleeps. So he realizes his whole life is going to become dependent on this little girl. Right, so he already fears that. And also, lie awake long nights. I mean, he's lying awake worrying, but also a baby is going to keep you awake. So he knows that everything is going to change. And the things that he worries about is that she's not going to be able to find laughter. He wants happiness, so worried that instead she's going to feel lonely at times. She's to worry maybe about her own basic needs, hunger and thirst. And he wants to ensure that she's never in need of those things. She always must feel she has company. He wants to make sure she's got food, milk, water. He doesn't want her to struggle for anything. However, your parents can't protect you. Sometimes you have fights with friends and you do feel lonely. And that's something that will cause your parents sleepless nights because they worry and they worry that you're not feeling the best that you can. Right, so he knows that he is going to worry about her happiness and about giving her her basic securities in life. Okay, he then goes on to say that he worries he's going to overwhelm her waking world with wonder. I'm sure you notice the W's there, there's a lot. What he means by that entirely here is that he wants to make sure that she's got everything to make her life beautiful. And he's so worried that he might be trying too hard just to make everything perfect because nothing can be perfect. And he has to now start realizing, wait, what if I can't give her a perfect world? That's something that your parents have to face, and it's a very, very scary thought. Right, so he wants her world to be filled with wonder, music, poetry. Obviously, poetry and the arts are important to him. When he talks here about her earlier home, he's meaning when she's in the womb in her mother's stomach. So from then already, I mean, technically from before already, he's worrying about these things. And he hopes that she never lives a life where she's overwhelmed or confused. I think those are two things that really leave you feeling anxious, and he doesn't want that for his child. He wants her to feel secure and certain, not overwhelmed and bewildered, which means you're confused. Right, and again, your parents actually can't stop that from happening, which is a very scary thing. The W sounds here, you can see they're everywhere. And what the W sound does is it often has a sadness to it. Right, so it sounds here like this beautiful world he wants to create, but he's actually being quite wistful, quite sad, because he knows he cannot always give it to her. All right, very, very, actually kind of heartbreaking. He says here his very breathing will depend on her. His whole life, he will just live for this child. So she's so tiny, these tiny fingers, but they completely hold him. Then he's worried that no matter what he does, something hurtful, in this case it could be apartheid because of the setting, even bullying, something terrible could happen and it could crush her butterfly spirits. Now you might think, why butterfly? Metaphor to show that a butterfly is fragile, beautiful, delicate, and it can easily be destroyed. So he is so worried that just like a butterfly, his child's spirit will be destroyed sometime by something. You are always going to face negativity, unfortunately bullying, unfortunately hurtful actions, and your parents can't always fix it. So he knows that no matter what he does, there's always going to be this worry that something will come along and break your child's spirits. I think also that your parents very much feel that when you are going through something, they almost feel it the same because they know they can't help. He now brings in more of the apartheid setting. He says here he's worried about bringing her into the shadows of a sun-darkened land. So into the system of apartheid, where maybe based on color, she is not seen as important. And that really worries him because obviously she is important. And he's just not sure how the system or the political climate in South Africa at that time was going to be accommodating for her. He worries that this eclipse, this change is not going to happen. He's worried that apartheid won't end and she'll be born into a land of hatred. Luckily, apartheid did end, and luckily we've all learned that we have to accept everyone because we're all the same. But he was so worried that when he was thinking of having a child, that this equality wouldn't be something that she would experience. Okay, so that really, really worried him. However, he says he cannot actually deal with the thought of not having her. He comes to the conclusion that it's better to have this child in your life to give your life meaning than to not have the child just because you're worried. I still say to you, I'd come back to the lowercase I. This is because he feels so unworthy in terms of raising this child. It is the biggest responsibility anyone will ever face. A president of a country is not even going to take on as much of that responsibility. It is a really, really huge challenge. And parents who bring a baby into this world, knowing that they're going to face these challenges, that's brave. So he realizes no matter how unworthy he feels to be a father, he knows that being a father will bring so much meaning to his life. Right? So the conclusion at the end, it's almost like he's debating with us, should I have a child, should I not? And he comes to the conclusion, yes. Also because maybe this child will be the light the world needs to change the country. All right, so he decides, you know what? I'm going to raise her to be strong. I'm going to raise her to be thoughtful. And I'm going to raise her to fight for the equality that the country needs. So instead of worrying about the political system at the time, which was terrible, he was able to realize that maybe she's the light that actually is needed. All right, and obviously we know her name, Tazkia, was given to her, and she was born. So it's a simple poem. I think once you know to insert the I fear that or I fear I shall, it makes a lot more sense. And just remember, there's no such thing as a perfect parent. So this is more for your parents, but it's also for your expectation. Let your parents be real. They are human too. They're not aliens like we said before. They're not robots. Understand that your parents are putting so much love and effort into you. And again, when I say parents, I mean anyone who's looking after you. Everyone has different circumstances. But parents really are overwhelmed and confused on a daily basis so that you don't always have to be. So if anything that you learned from this lesson today, go and thank the person in your life that looks after you. Try to be a little bit more understanding with them and just give one big hug and just say thank you. On that note, I'm going to thank you. Thanks for watching Grade 9s. This poetry lesson was brought to you today by WorksheetCloud and me, Mrs. Nortier. I'll definitely see you guys again soon. I hope that you enjoyed the poetry lesson and that you were able to realize a bit about what your parents go through. Bye.